Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Wednesday, April 23rd. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP co-founder and president Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, gentlemen, Elon Musk says he's going to be spending more time on Tesla and less on DOGE in the months ahead. This comes about the same time that Tesla reports a 20% drop in car sales for the first 3 months of the year and a 70% drop in profit. So, Tom, Musk is a temporary government employee, so this is not fully unexpected. But what do you make of the announcement?
Well, he always said that this was going to be a temporary thing and that he'd get the system set up and then step away. But it's hard not to link the two things that you just mentioned, Andy. I mean, the report from Tesla that a 70% drop in profits is pretty astronomical. And so he's going to be spending more time working on, his core business and trying to get that turned around, and maybe do some other things with it. But he says he'll still be involved, a day or two a week. So he's not fully going away, but he's stepping back, and we'll see, how that plays. Obviously, he's been a flashpoint. And if you look at the polling on him, Elon Musk, his favorable ratings, particularly among Democrats and independents, pretty low, underwater. I mean, he's taken a lot of the brunt of the changes that have happened in the administration. And he's been very out front about that. He sort of seems to invite the controversy, if you will. And so I fully expect that he'll still be a bogeyman for the left as long as he's involved at all. But he's certainly not going to be having the sort of high profile that he's had thus far.
Yeah, Carl, it's been interesting because a lot of people expected there to be a clash between Trump and Musk, and that would be the way he goes out the door. But
I think Carl gave until Valentine's Day. I think that was the prediction, right, Carl? The bromance was going to last to Valentine's Day.
Wow, we have that tape someplace.
We do.
Pull it up.
Well, it's not my fault. The liberals who've been buying his cars started attacking his cars, so Trump was stuck with Trump. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Trump, what could Trump do? I had not anticipated that thousands of people who said that if you didn't buy a Tesla, you wanted to kill Mother Nature and you hated the planet Earth, now decided that they're going to go around firebombing Tesla dealerships, harassing Tesla drivers, keying their cars. I didn't see that one coming.
Is it too early, though, to judge the effect Musk has had? Do you think he'll be around for a while?
Yeah, it's probably too early. Musk was about cutting government waste. Tariffs were not his thing. He got in a spat with Peter Navarro. Tom, you mentioned that his profits, or we both mentioned the profits are down, but that's partly because of the tariffs, partly because some of these parts come from China. Sales are down, what do you say, 20%, profits down 70% or 30%, profits down 70%. What that tells you, it's not all the sales that's hurting him. There's other factors. And he's, if you pay attention to his business, apart from DOGE, his next thing is driverless cars. And there was somebody he gave an interview. I don't remember where I saw it, but he said, in the future, people won't even own cars.
Here's the quote. He said, "The reality is, in the future, most people are not going to buy cars."
Yeah. So look, he's got a lot to do on that. He also, by the way, he's doing SpaceX. He owns Twitter, which is the original reason before he gave $250 million to help Trump get elected. But the original reason liberals turned on this guy, and he used to be a liberal till quite recently, was Twitter. He came in there and got rid of the censorship regime, and Democrats didn't like that. The party that was once the great champion of freedom of speech isn't anymore. So you have all these things go, and then the DOGE thing was like the last straw. They just, Elon Musk is Hitler, and they lost their minds over the guy. So I think some of this dust has to clear, Andy, before we know what's the budget going to look like a year from now? Were they successful in cutting the deficit? I mean, that's what he was doing in Washington.
Well, Tom, we've talked about the drop in the car sales and the drop in the profit. The stock is down 30% for the year, but I looked at it. It's about where it was in December. And if you go over the last 5 years, it's up 550%. That's Tesla. his is the only electric car in the top 25 selling cars in the United States. It's probably has more American-made stuff in it than any other automobile. It's a pretty remarkable record what he's done with that company. And we sort of focus on this sort of, last quarter, but all in all, pretty remarkable run he's had with that company so far.
Not just with that company, but with SpaceX and X as well. I mean, I think there was a clip of Peter Thiel that was circulating recently saying, look, 20 years ago when he got involved in SpaceX and Tesla, they were crazy ideas. People thought he was absolutely insane. And he said, to have one of those companies be a success would have been remarkable. To have two of them be a success or both of them be a success is extraordinary. And so, look, as Elon Musk turns to, and he mentioned, that they're basically going to produce more Teslas that are just like the ones that are out on the road now, but just make them cheaper, make them more affordable for people. But they're not going to be introducing new models and things like they've done in the past. And they're going to shift their focus to these driverless cars, these cyber cabs, and Optimus Prime, the robots that Elon Musk is every now and then, touting. And the question is, I wouldn't bet against the guy. I mean, he's been able to see around a lot of corners a lot further than a lot of people have. And so he's probably, if I were a betting man, I'd bet on him for that. But the question is, has he permanently damaged his reputation among the 45% of folks out there, even if he's producing amazing products, as Tesla cars are universally acknowledged to be, a feat of engineering, and we're way ahead of their time versus all the other electric cars that were out there. So he produces these great cabs, cyber cabs that don't have any drivers or pedals or anything and steering wheels, and you hop in them and you zip around. Is that only going to, will liberals never, ever get in one of those or buy one of those? Will they never get an Optimus Prime, even if they're affordable for people and can do amazing things for them, simply because they view him now as I said earlier, the political bogeyman, and they've just written him off. And so that'll be interesting to see whether he'll be able to repair his reputation politically among those who see him as a, sort of a nefarious figure.
Yeah.
Andy, Tom raises an obvious question that has an answer that's just like a big, fat, juicy ball sitting on a T-ball for me. Well, if there's going to be another presidential election in 3 years, if Elon Musk finds himself working for Gavin Newsom and Gavin Newsom wins, all will be forgiven, right?
I suppose so. I think the fact that
it's like a drinking game, isn't it, Tom?
It really is.
Right.
It's remarkable, Carl.
I think this Optimus thing is really interesting, and he says he's going to have 100 million of these a year. He's going to be rolling off. That's the number.
Wait, 100 million?
100 million a year. Yes, I think.
What could go wrong with 100 million robots wandering around?
Right.
I'm going
all programmed by Elon Musk.
I'm going to send him Isaac Asimov's novel. We should do a program on the 100th anniversary of iRobot. Maybe it's already come and gone.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to talk about someone else.
Hold on a second. I mean, the way he describes these things is they're going to be like personal butlers. They can walk your dogs and they can do, your laundry and all these amazing things and increase your productivity and all that. But just imagine if, some billionaire buys up 10 million of them or something. It has its own robot army. It could lead to some interesting problems in the future.
Will Smith can do the sequel.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about something that's happening in the more near term, and that's Dick Durbin from Illinois. He says he's not going to run again in 2026. He's 80 years old. He said today, this morning, on Wednesday, it is time to pass the torch. Tom, you're out there in Illinois. What does this mean?
It means there will be probably a new Democratic senator from the state of Illinois. And already, this was not surprising. People were sort of waiting, but people have been maneuvering to get into this race. And his announcement today set off a whole series of events. And you can expect that there's going to be a pretty vicious primary on the Democratic side for this. Durbin, it also means that Illinois, Durbin was the number 2 in the leadership in the Senate. He was the ranking member on Judiciary. So Illinois is going to lose a decent amount of clout in the Capitol. But beyond that, there will be, the lieutenant governor, Juliana Stratton, is going to run. We have Lauren Underwood, a congresswoman, who's going to run. Raj Krishnamurthy, who's a congressman, Democrat congressman from the suburbs, has, I think, $19 million already amassed in his war chest, and he's obviously interested in this race. So, and there are a number of other folks on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, there really isn't anyone who is a surefire person to get in this race right now. There are a couple names that are circulating, including a couple that people on this podcast might know, but we'll see.
I'll say it. Let's get Richard Porter on and put the question to him directly.
Well,
if he's going to make news, he's got to do it on our podcast. That's exactly the deal. That's non-negotiable.
What about Rahm Emanuel, Carl? Do you see a possibility?
That's the name that I thought of right away. He hasn't talked about that, but people forget. I don't know how people forget. There's gaps in people's resumes. Dick Durbin, for instance, he spent 14 years in the House. It's when I first met him. He was in the House. He was very affable and easy to get along with, liked reporters. That was before he turned against the First Amendment. But Rahm had this storied career. He was in Clinton's White House. He was liaison with the Capitol Hill. He was mayor of Chicago. He went to Japan. He's done all these things. But he was in the House, and he did well in Congress, which surprised some of us who covered him when he was a younger man, because I was covering the White House, the Clinton White House, for the Baltimore Sun. I had members call me up complaining, do you know this blankety blank Rahm Emanuel? Like, just because I cover the White House, I said, yeah, well, he doesn't work for me, Congressman. He said, well, he's so hard to deal with. He's so arrogant. But he grew up. He got elected to a seat there. He rose through he was in the leadership. He was a very successful member of Congress. He did well on Capitol Hill. If he wants that job again, Tom knows more about the internal politics in the Democratic Party in Illinois than I do, but I think he'd be a formidable candidate.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys,
I don't know about that. I mean, he's been angling for governor, and if J.B. Pritzker decides not to run again, and that's the job that he really wants, is what I've been told. And the senator is it's a little tougher, I think, for him, because he's out there right now arguing that Democrats should stay away from social issues and focus on the economy, which is, I think, good advice politically overall, but not necessarily what the base of the party wants to hear. And then he's got some issues when he was mayor of Chicago, Laquan McDonald and things of that nature, that have made him, really tarnished his reputation among the rank and file progressives in the party, which is, you got to have those folks to win in a primary. General election is a little bit of a different animal, even in Illinois, though, because it is such a deep blue state, but he might have more success at the gubernatorial level.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, we're going to have to take a break now. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm with Tom and Carl. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. And guys, RFK Jr.'s in the news. The FDA announced it was phasing out the use of petroleum-based synthetic dyes in America's food supply. These dyes are used in Skittles, M&Ms, Fruit Loops, Gatorade, Doritos. Carl, a lot of other countries already got rid of these dyes. Is RFK on the right track here?
Well, I don't know how he got that by President Trump, but when he started cozying up to Donald Trump during the election, I thought of jobs that if he, people talk about him as vice president. Well, we knew that was going to happen, but I thought, EPA, because he sued, as he was a tough environmental lawyer, sued all these companies. I thought he'll be good there. Well, then I thought, shoot, Attorney General. I mean, his father was Attorney General. He was a very successful lawyer, but instead they gave him the job that oversees like vaccines, and people lost their minds. But this is an area he's talked about for years: child health, Americans' health through the food supply. It's something he's thought a lot about. He's talked about. This is not a surprise. I just hope. I mean, if I was a political advisor in the White House, I would just say, Bobby, whatever you do, keep your hands off McDonald's French fries. That will put us in trouble, not only in the midterms, but in 2028. You stick, M&Ms. Look, that's on the margin. It's not great, but just don't screw with French fries.
Well, Tom, the food companies sort of went along with this. There hasn't been much of a pushback against it, has there been?
No, and well, look, the red dye. The Biden administration had scheduled that to be phased out in January of 2027, and basically what RFK and the HHS basically told them that they need to speed that up, and they added a bunch of other dyes in there as well. The fact that they're petroleum based, I think, is probably news to a lot of people. That these, I think we oftentimes consume food without knowing exactly what's in there.
Tom, I didn't know it till Andy just said it.
Particularly, yeah, particularly, additives and whatnot. And so I think he's on the right side of this issue with the public. I mean, the public is going to, if to the extent they find out that they're eating, oil, petroleum products, and how that might be, it fits in with the overall thing. Look, and he said something the other day, and we're running a clip of it on the front page of RealClearPolitics this afternoon, which is, 60 million Americans have one dream and one dream only, and that's to get up every day and make it through without pain, without fatigue, right? And your health is the most important thing. And he wants to help make that a reality for those people who in this country who suffer from chronic disease. And I think that is a very much a winning message. It's very much the reason that there's the entire MAHA movement behind him of folks who have looked at, the way that our government has treated health over the last and nutrition over the last, 3 or 4 decades, and thought, man, we're not really doing this the right way. In fact, we might even be doing it the wrong way. And it is time for a change. And so on this issue, at least, I think he's absolutely on the right track, and we'll find majority support for it.
Andy, real quick, he's got an ally at the FDA and Marty McCary, and I think Jay Bhattacharya at NEH. I mean, this is a push of this administration that some of us didn't see coming.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch, and the other thing he said, I guess he just said yesterday, he said sugar is poison, and the American people should know that. So that gives you an idea of where this thing is going next, Carl. So you drink Diet Coke, so you're probably okay. But I want to talk about New York for a second. There's a contest up there for the Democratic primary for the mayorship. It's 2 months away now. Andrew Cuomo has emerged as the front runner, but he's not without critics. Politico had a piece with the headline, Andrew Cuomo's running on competence, but he keeps making campaign blunders. And they report that he misfiled this form that was to get matching campaign funds, could cost the campaign $2.5 million. So, Tom, what do you make of Cuomo, and is Politico right? I mean, if he's running on competence, can he run an incompetent campaign?
Yes, he can, and he can win. I mean, he's ahead by a decent amount in most of the polls that I saw. I mean, he doesn't really face. He's running against Zohran Mamdani, who's a Democratic Socialist State Assembly person. Which I was looking at him. It reminds me of the Adam Sandler movie "Don't Mess with the Zohan." You remember that movie? Because his website is Zohran for New York City. Look, so he's not facing a ton of challenges. He does still have, even though he is in many ways disgraced and has a ton of baggage on COVID with women, all those issues. He still has the name, which for a lot of people, that's all that matters. They know the name they know versus a bunch of names they don't know.
Well, and his father was a successful mayor.
Well, and there's still, yes. I mean, despite the fact that he's tarnished, I think there is still a reservoir of goodwill for the Cuomo name based on what his father did. And so that apparently seems to be enough for him to potentially win that race.
Well, Carl, we got about a minute left here, but the other wrinkle on this is that James Comer has resubmitted a request that Pam Bondi prosecute him for lying to Congress. That might. They may or may not take it up, but that story about the COVID for Cuomo is not going away.
Well, yeah, but probably Pam Bondi's the wrong person to make it a campaign issue. I mean, just this week, 3 more prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office up there quit because they said that they were being pressured to basically lie or admit admit that they went after Eric Adams for the wrong reasons. Eric Adams is still the mayor, by the way.
And running as an independent, by the way.
Yeah, and running as an independent. But I mean, so, it looks like the administration is just fooling around in that primary and then that mayor's race in a way that I think probably most New Yorkers resent. I'll say this though, I noticed that the New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand was talking about endorsing Andrew Cuomo, and the first thought that came to my mind was Al Franken, call your office. Or better yet, you don't have an office anymore, thanks to Kirsten Gillibrand. Call her office.
All right, well, guys, we're going to have to leave it there. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl, but don't go away. When we come back, Phil Wegman will be here. He's talking to Representative Don Beyer of Virginia. So good stuff coming up.
Hello and welcome back to Real Clear Politics. I'm Philip Wegman, White House reporter for RCP, and I'm joined now by Virginia Representative Don Beyer, who previously served as Lieutenant Governor of that Commonwealth. And before Congress, he also served as President Barack Obama's ambassador to Switzerland. He also, on top of all of that, has spent decades in the automotive industry. Congressman, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Philip. It's fun and important to talk about what's happening in the auto industry right now.
Indeed. So take us back to a week or two ago. You're in the House Ways and Means Committee. You have Jamieson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, and he's defending tariffs. But then out of the blue, the president suddenly institutes that 90-day pause. What's your impression of the Trump trade war so far? Is this a series of chess moves or is this chaos?
Chaos. It's impossible to characterize it as a series of chess moves because it's been so erratic and so many unanticipated consequences, at least unanticipated by Donald Trump. I mean, the rest of the world was able to figure out that starting a trade war is really bad policy. I spent my 5 minutes with Jamieson Greer just pointing out the many ways that these tariffs made no sense at all. Now we see the impact on the automobile business. Just today, we're reading that Stellantis is laying off employees in the United States. Volvo is laying off employees in the United States. Tesla's profits are off 71% in the first quarter, et cetera.
There is an argument from some who say, I'm not in favor of all of the chaos, but I want the United States to get serious about China. For instance, a recent CBS poll from February found that 56% of voters supported placing new tariffs on China. And of course, President Biden, he kept targeted tariffs on Beijing, specifically on the steel and aluminum industries. So give us a sense of where you and your colleagues are when it comes to more targeted tariffs. Are you opposed to targeted tariffs, or is it the entirety of what Trump has done thus far?
Philip, that's a good subtle question, because we acknowledge that the mercantilist, heavily subsidized, non-consumer based economy of China does give it a really unfair advantage over workers around the world, including American workers. It's also been a huge advantage to the American consumer because we've been able to buy so many things at such a low cost, and has kept inflation down by 1 or 2% year after year over what it otherwise would have been. The real objection to the Trump's tariffs was what he did to the EU, to Australia, to Brazil, to
our friends, to our allies,
Canada and Mexico especially. It's noticeable that steel and aluminum tariffs, which I have long objected to, in Biden years also, led to a decline of aluminum and steel output in the United States over those years, and a significant decline in the productivity of the workers in those industries. In the meantime, we complain that no one can buy a house. People your age have to move out to the deep, deep suburbs. You got to be older and richer to buy a house anywhere close to a city because the price of steel and aluminum and lumber is so much higher because of the tariffs.
I want to ask you about something that I hear Donald Trump say repeatedly. Because you spent so much time in the automotive industry before politics, I think that you're well suited to respond to this. What Donald Trump often says is that Europe doesn't take our cars. And he often asks, how many Chevys and Fords do you see in Munich? So what do you make of that criticism of the EU? And is it fair for them to slap Detroit with a 10% tariff well, we previously only imposed 2.5% on the EU.
Well, I think there's an argument for some kind of making sure that the tariffs are fair, one against the other. But those are to be negotiated. He walked away from TTIP, which, as you know, was the big Obama-led plan for rationalizing all tariffs and non-tariff barriers between the US and the EU. That would have gone a long way towards fixing something like that. In the meantime, you cannot underestimate the cultural differences in what people want in terms of their cars. Also their music and their clothes, but especially their cars. And I lived in Switzerland for 4 years. I was ambassador there. And you didn't see a lot of Japanese cars either. They really love their Mercedes and their BMWs and their Volvos. And some of that's national pride. Some of it is a perception of workmanship also. I know we make very good American cars, but let's face it, Japan got a huge foothold in the United States by beating the American cars on quality. Now, the American manufacturers can push back and say, well, that's because the Japanese had free healthcare, and that made a $2,100 difference per car. But still, there's a difference between what was perceived as the planned obsolescence in the United States and the quality of those Toyotas and Hondas coming in.
Yeah, and I asked Donald Trump in the Oval Office the other week about this EU offer that was on the table, a 0-for-0 tariff schedule on industrial goods, including cars, and he rejected it outright. But take us back to what you just said about cultural differences. Had that type of 0-for-0 deal gone through, I mean, would we see F-150s, in Switzerland? Is that something that should even be a policy that the government is pursuing, or should this just be left to the market and to consumers?
Well, let's figure out that one of the things the Europeans figured out was, what did Americans want? I sold Volvos for 46 years, and the Volvo figured out that they were designing their cars for the American marketplace. I've never seen somebody in Detroit design their cars for Austria or Germany or Switzerland. It's a different idea. Also, what Donald Trump misses is that the whole theory of comparative advantage, that we build the things that we're best at. And so he ignores the fact that US services dominate Europe, especially digital services. They love our stuff. My wife often points out the most important export we have is American culture. When you go to Europe, what you see is American movies and films and books and ideas. And intellectuals and science everywhere, and we dominate that. And we often have a huge balance. He likes to leave the services balance out of the trade balance.
Yeah, Congressman, I mean, it almost strikes me like you're talking in the way that some of your more trade-friendly Republican colleagues would have talked in just a few years ago. I mean, what have you seen there on the floor? Is it something, in the water? Is it that Republicans are really responding to voters? What do you make of sort of the transformation of the Republican Party that was once the bastion of big business, the best friend of the Chamber of Commerce, to what we see today?
Philip, I think this all comes down to Donald Trump. You didn't see this with John McCain or Mitt Romney, and you didn't see it with a lot of the other candidates running against Trump in 16 or 20, or maybe even a little bit in 24. So off the record, I think many of my Republican colleagues are much more pro-trade and pro-free trade than we're seeing on the House floor right now. And that's because they're part of the MAGA movement. It's tough to stand up to Donald Trump and expect any kind of political career.
But as an outsider covering all of this, you can see how some of this argument would make sense to a voter in Michigan, right? I mean, you have the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, out there making an argument about how globalism hasn't exactly been equitable, about how the coasts have done very well, but the middle of the country is falling behind. It seems that, Republicans are responding to something, if it's not, the last century of economic consensus.
Yeah, but it's not just globalism. Globalism is part of it. Technology is a much bigger part of it. I have toured dozens, scores of factories in the last 20 years, and you don't see a lot of workers. You see a lot of beautiful machines, and the workers you do see are making very good money, and they're highly technically skilled. Philip, one of the real failures is that in the process of creative destruction that comes with all capitalism, we have done a terrible job at reskilling and helping relocate the people whose old type jobs disappeared.
Is that the fatal flaw of a NAFTA where, yes, we increase trade with Canada and Mexico, and then Speaker Gingrich, he promises that job training is going to follow, but not, it certainly didn't follow in a meaningful way.
No, and I don't think we've really figured that out yet.
Mhm.
One of the reasons my Republican colleagues fight against trade adjustment assistance is they point to the fact that nobody really sees that it worked in the past, that you still have places that were hollowed out by globalization and by technology. And we have to do a much better job at that because that's not going away. With artificial intelligence coming in, it's going to affect even more Americans. And by the way, after NAFTA, we've created 50 million new jobs in America in those 25 years, but they're not necessarily in industrial Michigan or industrial Ohio. And the real flaw, I think, in Trump's thinking, Philip, is that the notion that tariffs are somehow going to bring those old jobs back. Because people can once again be happy putting, sewing sweatshirts or putting the same window in the same door all day long. People don't do that anymore.
With the time that we have remaining, I want to ask you two questions about legislation before the House. First, I know you support bills to ban insider trading. What do you make of some of the rather well-timed trades that certain members of Congress made ahead of that 90-day pause?
Very discouraging. It isn't the law yet. I've tried to sign on to every one of the Stock Act versions that are out there. When I sold my half of the dealership to my brother, I had money for the first time and bought a bunch of stocks. And then within about 6 months, realized people were watching the stocks that the stock manager was doing and thinking I had insider knowledge. So we took the capital gains hit and put it all in mutual funds. Because if we seek higher office, if we seek to represent people, we should be held to a higher standard. We shouldn't be seen drunk in public. We shouldn't cheat on our spouses. And we shouldn't be letting people believe that we're trading on our insider knowledge. We're getting rich and leaving them behind.
And second, quickly here, do you support legislation that would claw back tariff authority from the White House and return it to Congress? I know that's an uphill battle with Republicans in control of both the House and the Senate, but
very much so. So I'm the co-sponsor co-lead on legislation to get rid of the 232 tariffs, steel and oil, which is the national security, and the IEEPA tariffs, which are for international emergencies that Biden used also. But the Constitution is very clear that trade authority rests with the Congress. Selectively, Congress has given some of it back to the president. In this particular case, Donald Trump has way overused it, taken it to the ultimate extreme. We're not going to get it back while he's president, but we need to get it back in the short run.
Well, Congressman, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Philip Wegman. This is Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. Stay with us. We will have more right after the break.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined now by Susan Crabtree. She is national political correspondent for RCP and the co-author of a brand new book on California politics called Fool's Gold: The Radicals, Con Artists, and Traitors Who Killed the California Dream and Now Threaten Us All. So, Susan, congratulations again on the book, and welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much, Andy. It's great to be back with you.
So you were in San Diego yesterday, Tuesday. It was Earth Day to cover EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin's trip to the city. What was he there for, and what did you learn?
Well, he was there for this sort of ongoing decades-old issue. It's the Tijuana River sewage that flows from Mexico and onto the California beaches, and it's been really sickening, making our citizens sick, and also the Navy SEALs that practice on Coronado Island. As you know, they do a lot of heavy-duty training in the water. Right off of their training facility. So this is a deep concern. I've been covering this issue, I can believe, for decades. It keeps popping up from time to time, but it's gotten worse because the population in Tijuana has exploded, doubled the population in the last 20 years. And so the sewage is flowing like never before.
And so, yeah, this is interesting because I was talking to Carl Cannon as you know, who covered California, and he said, "Oh, remind Susan, he was covering this." He says 40 years ago, and so why now? I mean, is it because the problem has gotten worse, or is there some other reason why we're focused on it?
Yeah, so he has 1 decade of me covering this. I would. It was funny because a former congressman, was at the border yesterday that I had actually done a whole profile on, and he won his election. His name is Brian Bilbray, and he was a surfer in Imperial Beach, and he won his election because of this very issue, and that was back in the '90s, late '90s. So the reason why it's gotten worse is, like I said, at the mentioning of the population growth in Tijuana, and also the industry that we have gotten rid of a lot of our heavy metal industries in California and the United States, and we've sent them, as the big issue is right now, with the tariffs at Donald Trump. We have sent those offshore, all of those factories. So they're dumping these heavy metals into the Tijuana River, the factories in Mexico. And last year, there was a surge of 44 billion gallons of this contaminated water. And the Navy SEALs were getting very, very sick, and US citizens. I mean, the odor down there is just foul in the air. And the scientists say that it actually vaporizes into gases that then you breathe in as well. So US citizens and Navy SEALs are getting very, very sick, coming down with gastrointestinal illnesses as well as cancer that they believe is linked to this very problem.
Wow, it's so amazing because I think of that as being one of the really most beautiful parts of the world. I mean, that Coronado Island and the San Diego coastline in general. And I did see in your article, you mentioned that Navy vets have started dubbing it the next Camp Lejeune. Camp Lejeune, of course, being the place with the contaminated water that been a big cause for the big headache for the armed forces. Is it that bad? I mean, is it really something that could lead to sort of that, not only the sort of health problems, but the liability that we saw at Camp Lejeune?
Well, all I know is that the Inspector General for the Navy has found over 1,000 cases of illnesses associated with it that they have linked to this polluted water coming out onto the beaches and into the waters of the San Diego area. And it goes upstream, and it goes up, as far up as Los Angeles at times, but of course it gets diluted by the time it gets up there. So it's heaviest in this area right by the border where these Navy SEALs train. And when it comes to Camp Lejeune, as you know, it's been tens of billions of dollars it's cost our federal government, our US taxpayer dollars, to take care of that. So why don't we spend a few hundred million? That's what it looks like the price tag is getting to be. We've already spent about 650 million piecemeal issues trying to fix it on our side of the border. But now Lee Zeldin was down at the border yesterday. I've shadowed him there. And a lot of the congressmen that were with him, bipartisan group, there's bipartisan support for this. And so they really are. Lee Zeldin was very, very, that's the EPA administrator, very, very adamant that Mexico must do its part. He's demanding action from Mexico's side. And he met with his counterparts, and he did emerge hopeful from those meetings on Monday night, but said that this is something that he wants done and finished and in the rearview mirror by the next Earth Day.
Wow. Well, another California story, that is the governor's race. Steve Hilton, commentator for Fox News, announced he's running for governor. He's going to run as a Republican. What's the reaction in the state to Steve Hilton announcing he's going to run?
Well, I think that there is a lot of enthusiasm in the state for an alternative candidate to the Democratic supermajority that it's been, as you know, in my book, I outline this, running the state into the ground. Steve Hilton shares those views. He's been highly critical of the leadership of Gavin Newsom and the possibility that Kamala Harris might wade into a governor race herself. but the one factor that is concerning to some Republicans that I've talked to is that Sheriff Bianco is a very popular Riverside sheriff who's been very effective and very well respected, already announced that he would be getting into the race. So the Republicans like to have an alternative candidate like they did with Steve Garvey in the Senate race last time around. So they have, because California has this jungle primary situation where it's the top two contenders with the most votes out of the primary emerge, and then they run in the general. So they like to have just one strong Republican in the race. So Steve Hilton's entry will divide those voters. And he's not really addressing that issue when he's talking in his interviews so far. He believes he's the best candidate and wants to take on, doesn't cast himself as a traditional extreme candidate, even though he does have people like Charlie Kirk and others in the MAGA world supporting him. But he is saying he wants to reach out to independents. We'll see if he's successful or not.
Yeah, so it's a good point you make, which is that you call it a jungle primary. Basically, it's the the two candidates with the most votes run off. And those two candidates could both be Democrats. They conceivably both could be Republicans, although I guess a Republican hasn't won the governorship since Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? And so by splitting the Republican vote, it could end up ceding that second spot to a Democrat. So the politics, the internal politics are pretty important, I guess. I'm talking to Susan Crabtree. She is a national correspondent at Real Clear Politics. I'm Andrew Walworth. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. Just the other thing about Steve Hilton, is he well known in California as a Californian? Because to tell you the truth, I think of him as a Brit. I see him on Fox News, and I think he was he had a position or something in British government at one point, and that's sort of what I think of him. I don't think of him as an American politician.
Yes, I think that's one of the big hurdles he's going to have to overcome. He did work for David Cameron, the Prime Minister, at Downing Street, and he came to California just in 2012, and he had a tech startup in Silicon Valley, and then he became a talking head. So he's going to have to sort of explain where his street cred is in terms of managing large organizations, any kind of state government, other than being an advisor. He hasn't been the principal himself. So unlike Sheriff Bianco, who has been in a leadership role, managing many, many people and running a quite effective operation out there, tough on crime. He has a reputation in that big county in Riverside, which is inland from Los Angeles. So I think it's going to be interesting because Steve Hilton is very well spoken. He's dynamic. He had a huge, big splashy opening yesterday in Huntington Beach with the words "golden" together. Really a large set that he was on, and he was even dancing like Donald Trump at the end. So he is a very dynamic speaker. So it's going to be interesting sort of how he splits the Republican Party, and who is best able to capture those independent voters that are so critical in California. If Kamala Harris runs, I do think she's the lead candidate on that side, although they are splitting up on that side as well, with Xavier Becerra, former HHS secretary in the Biden administration, former senator, and attorney general of California, with the lieutenant. He's running against the lieutenant governor under Newsom right now. There are many candidates on the Democratic side. So yeah. We'll see how this all shakes out if he's running against Kamala Harris. Steve Hilton has been extremely critical of the reasons that she has said so far, or her aides have said so far, for her looking at the race. Not really helping California, but really looking at her own legacy, that she didn't want to be the final thing in her history, her legacy, to be certifying Donald Trump's election.
Well, Susan, we're going to have to leave it there. Appreciate it. I've been talking to Susan Crabtree from Real Clear Politics. You've been listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. On behalf of Carl, Tom, Susan, and everyone at RCP, we'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great evening.